What's that one story you've always wanted to tell on our Reddit, but no one has ever asked the right question? Part 2. When I was a kid, my mother told me to vacuum the stairs, so I went to the garage to get the car vacuum, since using the big vacuum would be too much of a hassle. As I was walking out of the garage with the vacuum, I felt something light on my arm. I looked at my arm and saw a black widow spider, and I instantly shook my arm to get it off. The black widow fell on the floor, so I got a rag to encase it and took it to the backyard and let it go on the grass. I was really into bugs, so I knew a lot about them. Somewhere in that information, I put together that a bite from a black widow would kill me in 15 minutes. I didn't feel any bite, and I also didn't see any bite marks. So there didn't appear to be any evidence of a bite, but as a kid I was paranoid to the point that I believed touching a picture of a spider would be like getting bitten by one. I believed that I was going to die in 15 minutes. I looked at the clock, 10 a.m. I went up to my aunt as she was playing pool and told her that I was going to die because I had a black widow on me. She said I wasn't going to die and continued playing pool. I sat on the couch, curled upright, and cried for 15 minutes. I looked at the clock again, 10:15 a.m. I was still alive. I went back to the backyard and watched the black widow in the grass, then went back inside to vacuum the stairs. We went on a lads' night out, and somehow two random Scottish birds ended up coming back to our house with like 14 lads. We're all just drinking, having a laugh, when someone points out that the one bird is tossing my mate off under a blanket. We all make a joke about it, call them out on it, and tell them to go somewhere private. So he takes her to my bathroom. He fucks her on the bathroom floor, and they come back downstairs after the deed's done. I go up for a piss, and there's a watery substance all over the floor, so I ask WTF is on my floor. She goes bright red. He starts laughing and says she's a squirter, mate. I was like, TF dude, clean it up. Nah mate is his response. So I went upstairs and cleaned this Scottish bird's jizz off my floor with a mop. Went back downstairs with the mop, walked straight up to him, and slapped him across the face with the mop. As for the two Scottish birds, the night went on. They stayed, and then her friends started to try and mug us off, talking about us being weird for inviting them back and so forth. I have no clue how they ended up back at my house. Even to this day no one knows who invited them back. They left shortly after my other friend took the piss out of them for coming back to a house of 14 lads, and one of them squirting all over the floor. They were pretty good sports about the whole thing. No one was nasty or anything to them. Just had a laugh overall. My friend created a game in college that was truly idiotic, immature, and was a way to just annoy you. The name of the game was Head, and you would repeatedly say head, 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 and push your head into the person. Being the immature idiot that I was, brought this game home to my friends, and it oddly caught on. Well, one day my friend and her little sister, who she was babysitting and was at a ripe age of mimicking her surroundings, went with me to get my haircut. As we were sitting waiting for my turn, the little sitter started playing the head game, pushing her head into my shoulder. Almost immediately her head slipped off my jacket and her face landed into my crotch, where she repeated head, head, head. Everyone in the area looked at us very strangely. My friend realized what everyone was implying and then grabbed her sister and yells, "We only play that game at home," where everyone then looked at us completely mortified, after which we got up and promptly left. To time, I was told by my dad to unlock the safe and load his gun and go sit next to the door, and don't let anyone but him open the door. He woke me up in the early morning and said my cousin's gang-affiliated boyfriend had hit her. So she took her kids and ran to our house that was like a mile way down a few corners. He didn't like that, so he and some friends went looking for her in the area. They knew my house was in, but they didn't know the exact house, so they drove around the blocks a few times looking, but didn't see anyone. So after an hour, they all gave up. The cops came about half an hour after that and told my dad, who had gotten there 10 minutes before that, what to do if he shows up, and took names and some details. But before he leaves, he says we are free to do what we have to if tries to get in the house. I didn't end up going to class that day. Thank you. I've always wanted to share this story. You all can tell me whether I dreamt it or was hallucinating. The setting: Saudi Arabia. The scene: my parents and I driving from where we lived, a small city on the coast, to a larger city about an hour and a half away. Imagine the desert. Now imagine a road running through it with a median in the middle. That's it. That's what you see on Saudi road trips for hours and hours. There's nothing but desert. So, we're driving along, and it's prayer time. We stop by the side of the road, next to the desert, pull out our prayer rugs, and get to it. It's a fairly common scene there. You would always see families and people pulling up to pray by the side. There are about 10 million mosques throughout the country, but if you don't want the hassle of having to exit, then go in, go out. You just stop at the side, pray, and be on your way. So we've laid out our prayer mats and we pray. I'm done and waiting on my parents. I was a teenager, so I'm getting antsy. There's nothing but sand and the sun for miles around us. I see an abandoned car a little ways off in the desert, so I decide to go exploring. While I wait on my parents, I walk over. It was, I want to say, maybe a 5-minute walk, look inside the car, and have a heart attack because there, sitting in the driver's seat, is a skeleton. I panic, run back, and tell my parents as they're picking up the prayers mats. I think my mom's reaction was, "What the heck? Don't go wandering off alone into the desert." And my dad's was, "What? You imagined it." And he laughed. Several years later, I told this story to my cousins, aunts, and uncles, and my aunt flat out said I was lying. After all that, I genuinely have no idea whether what I saw was real or not. It wasn't so far in the desert that nobody could have come across it in the many years it must have taken for the body to become just a skeleton. Many years? I don't know how it works. How long does it take? But I do remember the feeling of absolute fear and running back to the car. My fiance's cat died about a month ago. I've been having a pretty hard time dealing with it. He's buried out back. I go and visit a lot. Just go back there and listen to music, smoke cigarettes, you know, shit a crazy person does. The day we laid him to rest, when we were putting him down there, 3 of the neighborhood cats poked their heads around the corner to see what all the commotion was. As soon as I saw their 3 little heads pop around the corner, they were gone. Ever since that day, when I go back to visit, at least one of the outside cats from the neighborhood will come back with me. Usually 2, sometimes 3 of them. They follow me to the burial site and just hang out with me however long I'm there. They play around with each other. They come to me for pets, just do cat things. But there's been times I was back there for hours and those cats always stay until I leave. It's something really small in the grand scheme of things, but it's something that has made me feel infinitely better. I've often thought of how to tell someone this story. Please pardon the length and complexity of this. I'll try my best to make it an easy read. When I was 8, I had taken a summer acting class with a small-time director. Let's call him S. He had a short TV series in the works and had some of us kids who were his students act in it. For free, of course. We all traveled a couple of hours to the countryside in western India to shoot for the show. Mr. S, he was directing the show, had arranged for a bus to take us into the little town where we were shooting. The bus ride was mostly boring, but we kids were trying to get to know everyone. One of the passengers was going to play the younger version of the protagonist. We hadn't ever seen him. When we asked him who he was, he told us his name, A, and that he was Mr. S.'s son. We teased him that he was lying, because we knew Mr. S.'s wife was young and his son was a little boy, not a teenager. I just smiled and said, "No, I am his son, from a previous marriage." This was India in the late 80s, and the idea that someone was married twice was strange to us. We just laughed it off and told him he was fibbing. He just smiled. The day of shooting finished. We kids didn't have any other scenes. I was dropped home past midnight and fell asleep as my parents tried to ask me how my day was. Nothing came of the TV show. It was soon a distant memory in my head. About 11 years later, I was on the hospitality committee of my college's annual festival. We basically had to welcome the special guests or judges and take them to their venues. This one day, you were to have a singing competition, and a mildly famous female singer and the winner of a national TV show for singing were invited as guests. When they arrived, we asked them if they wanted something to eat, drink, and the guests sat around and waited for their show to begin and for them to be called to their venue. The guy who had won the TV show was cute, but I'd never heard of him before. My friends had seen him on TV. Oddly, he kept staring at me. I was just about coming into myself as a young girl and was never quite used to getting attention from the opposite sex. "Do I know you?" he asked me. "I don't think so," I said, not sure if he was flirting or just being inquisitive. He asked me, in a friendly manner, a whole bunch of questions. in an attempt to figure out how he knew me. It was amusing because I was sure I had never met him before. "So you live in Z's? Do you know the actor Mr. S?" he asked. "Yes. I took acting classes with him one summer." "Did you by any chance act in the TV show he directed?" That's when it clicked. He was a. Once we figured out who we were, we started chatting like old friends. I told him that back then we were young and stupid and didn't realize that his father had left his mother and him for a new wife. I apologized for acting like an idiot back then. He immediately and freely talked about how he felt growing up, abandoned and fatherless. We just sat and chatted while the people around us gave us strange looks. We instantly clicked. Soon, it was time for him to go judge the competition. He left and I stayed to watch the show but left because I was tired from a whole day of work. This was before the time of cell phones, so neither of us bothered to exchange numbers or stay in touch. When I came home, I was not too tired to tell my parents who I met. In the months that followed, I thought of him fondly. I wondered if I had missed making an important relationship in my life. I wanted to talk to him again and feel that thrill of an instant connection. Many months later, my father came back from work and set down the newspaper that he carried to read on his bus ride to work. He said he'd read some bad news. "What is it?" I asked. "Remember, there's a small news article that says he committed suicide. Alcohol poisoning." I was stunned. It made no sense to me. Why did I get to meet this guy who I had all but forgotten only for him to disappear for good? If I hadn't met him a few months ago, the news wouldn't have made sense to my father. We would have ignored that little piece and gone on with life. The news also made clear that while I did make a strong connection with him that one day, I hardly knew him. We found out later that he was depressed and an alcoholic. I don't think he ever got over his father's abandoning of him. I always wonder what would have been if I had given him my phone number. But that's a pointless endeavor. Life is strange. So, in driving down a road near my apartment, to the right of me is a fenced-off forest area and to the left is a small shopping center with a pharmacy, supermarket, BK, etc. As in driving, this girl comes out of the fenced-off forest and goes to cross the street heading towards the shopping center. I remember her clearly because I had to slow down pretty hard for her. And I thought about how weird it was that she came out of the forest. I figure no biggie, maybe she was just in there smoking weed or something. Months pass and I forget about her. Mind you, I live very close to this stretch of road and I drive on it every day. Maybe for months later I am turning into the shopping center I mentioned before. Driving along the side of the pharmacy where the trucks drop off stock, suddenly I notice this girl is right there. I slow way down because I'm still curious about her. She walks up to a bush that's halfway around the back of the building and kind of reaches under it, and pulls out a leather messenger bag that was hidden inside the bush. She throws it on and walks away. At this point I'm backing up traffic, so I had to just keep driving and I haven't seen her since. At first I thought maybe she was just homeless and living in the forest area. But she looks pretty clean, and it just doesn't seem like she is. Anyway, it's my own personal mystery. I'm a little late, so I'm sure this will get buried. That the birth of my son was the most traumatic event of my life, and I can't tell the story in person without it turning into an exercise in one-upsmanship and labor horror stories from other moms. To make a long story shorter, I was 19 and terrified, in active labor for 30 hours with no significant change in dilation. My water finally broke and was meconium stained, meaning my deadline for getting the baby out moved way up. I hadn't slept in 48 hours at that point, and when morning rolled around, the first thing the day shift did was bring in a crash cart and explain that it was likely that my son would either be born not breathing or have significant difficulties because he had most likely inhaled meconium. A few hours pass and I still haven't dilated beyond a 7. You are supposed to be a 10 to start pushing, so I get rushed off for an emergency C-section, which I hadn't planned for in the slightest. Remember, I'm 19, sleep deprived, and terrified. Surgery goes fine, if incredibly scary. Son breathes fine but is rushed off to NICU for antibiotics in case he did swallow meconium. My anesthesia wears off and I am in the most agonizing pain I have ever felt in my young life. I'm puking and begging for pain relief, and my recovery nurse chides me for throwing up at risk of harming my incision. She brings me ibuprofen once and then never again throughout the night. Even when I called and asked, comes in at some point in the night and administers a medication to help with itching from the anesthesia, which I tell her I am not having an issue with, but I am in immense pain and Can I please get at least another dose of ibuprofen? If not something stronger. She says sure, but then never returns. I begin having an allergic reaction to the unnecessary medication in my IV. I'm delirious from pain, lack of sleep, and now lack of oxygen as my throat starts to swell. I'm not coherent enough to tell my husband that something is wrong, but he fortunately notices my lips swelling and rings for the nurse. She says she'll be there in a minute. He called 3 more times in a 10-minute period and finally runs out to get help. When I start to look blue, nurse comes in and goes, "Oh my God, you are having a reaction," and immediately disconnects the IV. That was the last I saw of her that night. When 7 a.m. rolled around and the day nurse took over, she saw that I was still caked and laying in disgusting bloody sheets, and asked why I hadn't had the cath removed or my sheets changed yet. I told her I was in too much pain to stand, and as she logs into the computer, she sees that I had a Percocet prescription that the night nurse had decided I didn't need for whatever reason. She asked me more about the night and was appalled at everything that had happened. She called in the Percocet, and I was finally able to get out of bed and see my son for the first time in the 14 hours since he'd been born. Just a truly horrible experience. If you read this whole wall of text, thank you for sticking with me.